I'm Rich Lewis. Welcome to Off Your Soccer, everybody. Today, as always, we'll be looking back at the weekend's Premier League action. We're going to have a look at Aston Villa coming from behind yet again. Also looking at the multiple reports of Arsenal's dark arts and just asking, have they been made way too much of? Nottingham Forest seem to be becoming a force, unbeatable so far in the league this season. Liverpool have returned to form, but will contract distractions remain? And West Ham fans on edge at the moment too, with yet another poor result. So going back into the first point there, Aston Villa, they've had a really strong start to the season. They had another early blow today, as they did in the last game, but again they turned things around. It wasn't quite the 2-goal swing this time, as they had to do obviously against Everton, being 2 goals down at home to the Toffees last time out. However, this time it was still, to do it again and again, it's very, very impressive. And, Wolves, local derby, it could have been very, very tough for Villa there to come back into that. And you're looking at, 15 minutes to go before they did manage to sort of start to turn things around. They ended up blowing Wolves away, really, with that sort of late show. And that helps to build resilience. Doing what they did against Everton to come back and win there. Doing it obviously again against Wolves. They were 2-0 up against Leicester and conceded a goal and managed to hold on to the 2-1 victory too. All that helps in games going forwards, not just them, but also in the sense that the opposition will know that Aston Villa are never buried. So knowing that they have that in their locker just makes them a much tougher and stronger proposition, just from a mental standpoint, let alone the ability that they have. And Unai Emery's built a very good side there, but creating this aura around you where you're never beaten really, really does sort of make you a stronger team in the eyes of everybody else as well. John Duran, massive sort of bonus for Villa this season in terms of his early form. I think it would have been reasonable had he dipped a little bit after not seeing a move come off over the summer. It did look like he was angling for that. West Ham looked pretty odds on it at one point, but he stayed there and he started the season in absolutely fantastic form. An absolute belter last week, and he's got on the score sheet again today. So absolutely huge for Villa that they haven't got to rely solely on Ollie Watkins to get the goals this season, which is a good job because, even though he's back on the goal trail now, he has missed some glaring chances. Is it worrying they're conceding so many goals? Yeah, it is. At some point, they're not necessarily always going to turn it around. There might come a day if they do keep conceding where, they don't manage to come back into it. And now I know this contradicts slightly what I was saying before. I mean, it is good to have it in their locker. That's what I'm trying to say, But if you keep doing it week in, week out, at some point your luck's going to run out. So the Villa are going to have to try and avoid going behind at some point. However, right now, it's really good for character building and they're getting strong positive results. Started the Champions League well as well. And everything's looking pretty rosy for Aston Villa. On to probably the big game of the weekend in more ways than one. A lot's been said after Arsenal's 2-2 draw with Manchester City about Arsenal sort of embodying the dark arts to manage to get through, to get a result out of the game. That's what they had to do to sort of shut City down. But I think too much has been made out of that. So let's go through a few things. A lot was made of the opening seconds of the game and Rodri being barged to the floor. Well, yeah, okay, that obviously Rodri was knocked down, but he rolled around a lot more than he needed to in that moment. It just seemed a little bit unnecessary. Obviously, the injury that occurred much later on was hugely unfortunate. That's not what we're referring to here, because that was obviously a very serious injury for Rodri. And if reports are to be believed, it looks like he is now out for the season, which is going to be a huge, huge blow for Manchester City. And we covered that obviously on a short as well already. The ref, I don't think, helped the tone of the game and the build-up to the Calafiori goal and the Trossard decision. I think you're looking at the Rice effect with that one. But the Calafiori goal, obviously, it was where Kyle Walker has been talking to the referee, but both captains have been talking to the referee. He's trying to get everybody to calm down. Walker's obviously got to go back and try and tell the rest of his team, the referee needs you to all sort of try and put a bit of a lid on things. Things are getting a bit out of control. But before Walker's really set and ready, the referees let Arsenal take the free kick, which leads to the ball finding Calafiori, who scores a wonderful, wonderful goal. But that just seemed to inflame tensions on the touchline. It just didn't help the the already sort of, spicy nature of the game, although it's great for the neutral. Also, the Trossard decision as well. I think it all comes back to Declan Rice getting sent off. I think that decision has had a major knock-on effect. Now, I'm sure the referees will say there's a directive this season. We're not tolerating any knocking the ball away. But referees, in an individual moment in a game, have a lot of power to change the course of a season. We have a lot of fads where we don't, you see something being clamped down on and it lasts for several weeks, maybe a few months sometimes, but it always ends up fizzling away. This might have to endure a bit longer because now we're seeing a debatable decision be reinforced, and you're seeing up and down the country now the ball being kicked away, in not necessarily even where it's preventing an attack or it's kind of non-consequential at times, and yet yellow cards are coming out. So it's worrying that we're seeing so many soft yellow cards just because it's inevitably going to lead to more red cards as the season goes on. I thought it was something that would blow over quite quickly, but what's happened in this game in Trossard has definitely just reinforced what happened with Rice previously, and I think the referees now are going to double down on this just to really show, it's a bit of a show of faith in their own decisions. I wasn't convinced Miles Lewis-Skelly needed to be booked either for his off-the-pitch antics. Don't think there was much in that. And yet somehow Pep managed to avoid a booking for basically stamping a hole in his chair. I think I didn't see myself, but I think he was berating the fourth official as well. So again, there's an imbalance there which isn't going to help in terms of the tone of things and feeling like there's a quality in the way the game's being refereed and managed. It did get a bit messy later on, I will say, though, in terms of, Arsenal employing the so-called dark arts where you've got Rice and Timber, etc., finding ways to waste time, and that's inevitable in a game like this in the latter stages in particular. I thought Erling Haaland was like a one-man sort of tormentor of Arsenal in this game, and it was hilarious when he threw the ball off Gabriel. It shouldn't be, but it just was watching that, and Gabriel said it was all part and parcel of the game himself as well. So there were no hard feelings there, but it did add to the tension in the game, the atmosphere. I say tension, it was almost a release of tension, in fact, when City did score that late winner. I think it's all part and parcel of the game, and a lot's been made of it, but that's what you have to do sometimes. I mean, look, ultimately, more teams should do this against City. And for me, ironically, it was actually the best way to upset Arsene Wenger's old Arsenal side. As a Manchester United fan, you went into those games and you were hoping they're going to put the foot in, they're going to wind them up, they're going to kick them, because more often than not, that was the sort of thing that would get you a result in those games. And they were some of the most memorable games of the Premier League era, those Manchester United Arsenal fixtures, because they had an edge. They always had an edge. And I think it's fair to say for a lot of games in recent years, amongst the bigger sides or the so-called Big Six, for example, they've lacked an edge at times. They've been stale affairs. Not all of them. Don't get me wrong. There's some games still where you go, oh, that was a right game, but they're not as many as they used to be. And I think I don't mind seeing what we saw in the Arsenal City game more often. Nottingham Forest, they're building a good team there. You look at the type of team they've built, and it also means they don't need to have possession. It's not expected of them. They've got players who can use the ball too. And James Ward-Prowse coming in, obviously a very handy operator. Elliot Anderson, good on the ball. They are designed really to play on the transition, if you like. And when you've got Anthony Elanga and Callum Hudson-Odoi providing the pace and the trickery, Morgan Gibbs-White through the middle, and you've got some force in the sort of the number 9 role too, with either Chris Wood or Araniyi. There's something there. And then now Jota Silva and Ramon Sosa, they combine very well for the equaliser. You feel they've got some backup in those areas too. And they look like a very competent Premier League team now. This isn't the Forest who are scrambling signings together to try and, shape some sort of team to stay in the league. I think they're now reaching that slight tipping point that Brighton did, several years ago, where it's can you emerge from what you were when you came up to becoming a regular Premier League team, something Fulham, which, after many failed attempts, have managed to do again now, and they've got themselves back in a place where you look at that Fulham team and that's a very strong Premier League outfit. And I think that's where Forest are, very similarly to those teams. They've got some really good Premier League experience from, across the top teams of the league brought in there, and it just makes them such a dangerous proposition to play against. One other thing to really point out, though, from the game itself, Morgan Gibbs-White, I thought the decision was bizarre. And I feel like maybe I'm in the minority here because I looked at some of the other feedback and people have gone, no, that was definitely a yellow card. But I don't think it was obvious. And I think the big issue for me is the referee initially signals that he got the ball, and it's the fourth official making the call here, which that's mental in this respect. The referee doesn't have as good a view as the fourth official. I'll concede that. The fourth official has a slightly better view. But we were talking about having the official, like, not re-refereeing the game via VAR, but this can't be relayed immediately by the fourth official. Like, there is a lot of deliberation here because the referee has time to signal, like, no, it was fine, he got the ball. He makes the motion saying he's got the ball there. So, okay, fair enough, I'm comfortable with that. That's fine. But the next thing you know, he's sending him off. Now, this wasn't like, for me, it was a heavy tackle. It was a heavy tackle, but he's come out with the ball. I think in real time, a foul would have definitely been given for the sweeping leg that comes afterwards. You know, you could say there was a little bit of a follow through there, but definitely, I just think to have not called it instantly and then to give it afterwards didn't sit comfortably with me. And then obviously what ensued after that was you end up with both the managers getting sent off, one of the coaches getting booked, because the coaches are getting mixed messages. They're seeing the referee say one thing on the pitch, and then next thing you know, another thing's happening. So I think the referee caused the problems that occurred after that. And I think it was incredibly unfair to then send off the coaches as well, who had every right to be incensed by what they were seeing on the pitch because there was no clarity there. Yeah, it was a ridiculous moment in the game. And for me, the referee lost control. And I think he went to quite extreme lengths to try and regain it. And it wasn't good for the game, ultimately. Liverpool have returned to form, which I obviously take no pleasure in saying as a United fan, but yeah, I did wonder after the defeat against Forest if, you know, maybe this could create a little bit of doubt there in the players' minds that is this going as smoothly is this going to continue to go as smoothly as it had in the opening weeks of the season? Well, apparently the answer is yes. They're back in the swing of things. Luis Diaz absolutely on fire. Could have easily had a hat-trick, maybe even 4 goals. Obviously a huge boost for Darwin Núñez as well with his fantastic finish. There was that obviously early wake-up call for Liverpool when Sinisterra's offside goal obviously it's an offside goal, so it was ruled out, but they responded really well to that. You saw Trent Alexander-Arnold play a massive part in Diaz's second goal, and he discussed his future after the game and basically gave the indication that there are talks over a new deal. He talked again about wanting to be captain at Liverpool, but there must be a reason that himself, Van Dijk and Salah have got to this point whereby they don't have a new contract yet. And the only thing I can think now is you're looking at 3 of Liverpool's most high-profile players. You know, Van Dijk and Salah are undisputably 2 of their biggest players. And I think a lot of Liverpool fans would probably put Trent in there as well. And I can only think that the reason it's got to this point is FSG don't want to break their wage structure. And you're probably at a point now with these players where even at the ages that Van Dijk and Salah are at, they're still going to request a certain amount of money. Now, that's going to throw everything out of balance for them, and it must be a really hard decision for them to go, okay, we are going to break this. I think it's probably a slightly easier decision where Van Dijk and Salah are concerned, where if you are looking at paying extortionate amounts of money for players who are at the latter end of their career, maybe it's better to move them on and reinvest those wages into future signings. They obviously could have banked a lot of money for Salah last year, but it's so hard to let go of someone who is guaranteeing you a very decent goal return each year. So I can kind of understand why they did turn down the money that came their way. Having said that, when it comes to Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think really all the cards are in his hand. I mean, if Liverpool don't put the money on the table and it's a deal that him and his team aren't happy with, then he knows he's going to have the pick of clubs across Europe who will be more than happy to pay him a good wage to not have to pay a transfer fee. Someone who's probably entering their prime years now. And you could argue he's been able to work out the kinks at Liverpool. I've been one of the many people who've questioned his defensive ability. But I think there's a difference between questioning someone's ability in an area of the game and saying, this is a fundamental problem and this is just part of who they are and it's never going to get better, and saying this is a problem right now but they will learn and they will improve upon this. I remember Gary Neville, I remember watching him when he came through and thinking he had the reverse problem. His problem for me was in attack, and I just thought, you can't cross. In the early years when I was watching him, I just remember thinking he's skied that, he did some terrible balls, but as he got older and his relationship with David Beckham grew on the pitch in the first team, I thought, year upon year, his supply was getting better and better and better, and you'd never aim that as a criticism of him, in the sort of second half, mid-20s onwards. And it's the same for Trent for me from a defensive perspective where, players have weaknesses. All you hope is that when you enter sort of your mid to later 20s that you start to, sort of settle down and things calm down with the areas that you aren't as good with and you've learned. And I think you've seen it with Luke Shaw as well at United where there are areas of his game which were a little bit rusty. He was infamously criticised by Jose Mourinho where he said he had to tell him what to do on the pitch. But I think anyone who's watched Luke Shaw when he's been fit over the past 2 or 3 years would say he's a very well-rounded defender. He's good in defence. He's good going forwards, and a lot of that has came as he's gone into his mid-20s and and beyond. And I think the same will be for Trent. I think he has been weak in his defensive play, but I think he's definitely getting better. And I think by the time you're looking at sort of the finished article and he's sort of you're 28 or so, I think he's just going to be a very complete defender. And unfortunately for Liverpool, they might not see the benefit of this. West Ham fans are on edge, and rightly so at the moment. But Chelsea's first 2 goals in particular were far, far too easy, and Nicholas Jackson was more than happy to capitalise on some really poor defensive play. It's only 4 points from the first 5 games now for West Ham. Defeats against Villa, City and Chelsea, however, they do play a big part in this. And it was a really tough start to the season for West Ham, to be fair. There was no sort of room there to build any momentum, get themselves going under a new manager with such big games coming up really early on in the season. And they'll be looking for some slightly easier fixtures, although that isn't coming up too soon. They've got a relatively big game up next as well. But I think maybe they do need some time to sort of settle down under Lopetegui. In terms of the issues, I had a little look to see what West Ham fans thought online. And obviously, if you're listening to this, any West Ham fans, please get in touch and let us know what you think that the real problems are. And also, anyone listening now, don't forget to like and subscribe below. Now, I do wonder if there's just been maybe too much change with players who are incapable of maybe trying to play the way the manager wants them to play. So I saw some people referring to the fact that he insists on using a high line, and yet the players at the back are pretty slow. And Tadebo's not getting in the team for whatever reason at the moment, which just seems a whole heap of weird right now. But he's not, and all it takes, it's so easy for the opposition to get in behind. Now you think, I know I come back to Manchester United quite a lot, but obviously as a fan, that's where I watch a lot of the games, and there is a parallel here for me with Erik ten Hag, and last season in particular. Even though he already had a season in charge, by his standard, like sort of from his point of view, he'd compromised that season on his style of play because of the players he had. But in reality, he should have really been doing it last season too. It wasn't until the summer window just gone where we've really brought in more of the type of player that allows him to play something akin to his football. And he didn't compromise last season, and it almost cost him his job. There's a real chance that Lopetegui could lose his job too if he doesn't compromise here, because playing this high line, teams are going to get in time and time again. We've seen Brighton have some similar struggles under their new manager against Forest too. And, yes, managers need time to implement their ideas and their way of playing, but you have to make sure that the players that you have are capable of doing that. Now, if it's something that's going to take 2 or 3 months to bed in, maybe you can get away with that as long as you can pick up a few wins and sort of not be right down the bottom. Because, it's going to take time to implement something new. But if you're looking at players who aren't going to gather this pretty quickly, the Premier League's unforgiving, and you're not going to get time to do that. You're absolutely not. So I think the West Ham manager is going to have to really think about his priorities here, because by the time he might even get remotely close to getting his organisation set up and getting the players playing how he wants to play, he might be about to lose his job. I've also seen some fans saying that maybe the manager's confusing players, issues with square pegs in round holes. It looks like he's struggling to motivate them. And on top of that, as we mentioned with Villa before, where they were really lucky to keep John Duran, West Ham were massively unlucky to miss out on him. Fulkrug might get going as the season goes on, and he might become a really integral player for West Ham, but he's at the latter end of his career anyway. Even if he was to have a good couple of seasons, it's not a long-term solution for West Ham, whereas Duran would have been. But I don't see John Duran going anywhere anytime soon now, unless Villa are given very big money by a very big European team. But yeah, the next 5 games really could put part of the pressure onto West Ham. So they've got the small matter of a League Cup game away to Liverpool. Now, Liverpool may well rest players, but either way, you'd expect West Ham probably to as well. And that's not a game to build confidence. Then they've got Premier League games against Brentford and West Ham. Brentford and Ipswich, And yeah, maybe there's some opportunities to pick up points. But here's the problem. If there's any slip-ups in those 2 games, even one defeat in 2 of those, they're then away to Tottenham and at home to Manchester United. So these next 5 games could really change the mood one way or the other around West Ham. And if you're coming off the back of that West Ham Manchester United game and they find themselves having lost, potentially 3 of the last 5 games there, and if they don't pick up maximum points against Brentford and Ipswich, yes, I know the Liverpool game is not in the league, but even so, it would still add to, on paper, what is a poor record. He could be in some serious trouble. On the flip side, you go and win some of those big games. If you can knock Liverpool out of the cup, for instance, or you get a home win against Manchester United, beat Spurs away, you're really going to start to maybe look at getting the fans back on side. So it'd be interesting to see where they're at in 5 games' time. As always, if you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe, hitting the buttons below. We're just going to have a little look at the results from the weekend now. West Ham 0, Chelsea 3, as we touched upon before, the same as Aston Villa 3, Wolves 1. Fulham got a really good 3-1 victory against Newcastle. Both teams had chances. It probably could have gone either way, but huge result for Fulham there, sort of cementing their status as one of the Premier League's more reliable and consistent teams. Leicester 1, Everton 1. Probably a good point for both in the end, considering Leicester's sort of position and their aspirations for this season, and Everton just needing to stop the rot. Liverpool 3, Bournemouth 0, as mentioned, fantastic performance from Luis Diaz. Southampton 1, Ipswich 1, great goal for Tyler Dibble in there. Solanke was off the mark as Tottenham beat Brentford 3-1, huge confidence boosting goal for him. Brighton 2, Nottingham Forest 2, as we mentioned, very eventful game there. Likewise, Manchester City 2, Arsenal 2 as well. If you want to hear more about Crystal Palace and Manchester United, please check out our You've Only Come to Hear United podcast on our channel, and lots more Manchester United related content there as well.